new college football playoff ranking is out, and we are getting closer and closer to Pitt's showdown with Notre Dame. There's lots of things to talk about with this game. There's lots of ways to break this game down. There's lots of matchups and different things to preview, but just wanted to get here. There's a basketball backyard brawl that's going to happen between now and the Pitt Notre Dame game. And I'm not going to say I'm not interested in the basketball game. I'm very interested in the basketball game. Tomorrow on the Morning Pitt, we're going to talk about Pitt basketball, about what we've seen out of the first 3 games and what we think heading into the basket brawl against the West Virginia team that's starting 5 transfers. So we really have no idea what to expect out of them. So we'll talk about it. We're interested in it. We're going to break it down and all those things. But this game on Saturday, man, let's get it rolling. Let's get started. Pitt up to number 22 in the rankings. Notre Dame climbs at number 9. That means it's a chance for Pitt to get a top 10 win. A win over a top 10 ranked team in the college football playoff rankings. It's all lining up. It's all right there. All the dominoes, whatever you want to call it, it's all right there in front of you. You just got to go out and get it done. So let's talk about the rankings. Let's talk about where Pitt is. Let's talk about this piece of paper that has lots of stats and data and info about some things that I think are going to be key in this game. And let's get you one step closer, or 20 minutes closer, to Pitt Notre Dame on Saturday here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, we'll have lots of time. We're going to be talking about this Pitt Notre Dame game a lot over the next few days. We've been talking about it a lot over the last few days. We're talking about it this morning. We'll talk about it tonight on the live Panther-Lair show. That'll be at 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so make sure you tune in for that. We will, like I say, tomorrow's Morning Pitt, we'll probably talk a little Pitt basketball to get you ready for the backyard brawl, the backyard basket brawl, I guess. We always try to make that work, and it just doesn't roll off the tongue. Basket brawl, the backyard basket brawl. Backyard, a few years ago, I forget who did it. Pittsburgh Clothing Company or somebody had a bar crawl in Oakland on the night of a Pitt West Virginia basketball game, a home game, and it was the backyard crawl. And I was like, that's great. That's a great name. Basket brawl just doesn't. It just doesn't roll off my tongue. I don't know. Maybe you're a little more dexterous or something that you can make that work. But anyway, tomorrow we're going to talk about the Pitt West Virginia game. I'm sure on Friday in the mailbag we'll have questions about the Notre Dame game. We'll talk more about it then. But lots of Pitt Notre Dame pregame content to get you ready, and some other things that I think you'll enjoy this week content-wise. So some things to look forward there over the next couple days. Like I say, Pitt jumped in the college football playoff rankings last night. They moved from 24 to 22, about what we expected. Some of the teams ahead of them, Missouri and Washington, losing. Iowa dropped 1 spot for losing to whoever they lost to. Who they lose to? Oregon. They lost to Oregon at home by 2, so they dropped from 20 to 21. Pitt goes from 24 up to 22, jumping over Missouri and Washington, kind of what we expected. We thought they'd move somewhere in that 23, 22, 21 range, end up settling at 22. Still 5 ACC teams ranked in the college football playoff rankings. Virginia and Louisville both dropped 5 spots each after their losses over the weekend. Virginia goes down to 19 after losing to Wake Forest. Louisville drops to 20 after losing to Cal. Meanwhile, Miami goes up 3 spots. For what did Miami do? I just looked this up. They beat Syracuse. Miami goes up 3 spots for beating Syracuse at home. Georgia Tech goes up 1 spot, gets jumped by Miami for being off last weekend. Whatever, they're still ranked. So Miami 15, Georgia Tech 16, Virginia 19, Louisville 20, and Pitt 22. Notre Dame, like I say, is 9. Keeping all 3 of Pitt's remaining opponents ranked as we head into these final 3 games of the regular season. Georgia Tech is going to be at Boston College this weekend. Obviously, the Yellow Jackets, if they lose that game, that's going to hurt them considerably with the rankings. I don't know if they would fall out from number 16, but I think we can assume that they will win and stay ranked inside the top 20, potentially, depending on what happens ahead of them, climb into the top 15, which would be great for Pitt. Miami currently at number 15. They will host NC State this weekend. Again, there's another one. I think if you're Pitt right now, you want to be rooting for. I mean, we already talked about the rooting interests of Virginia and SMU, one of them losing at some point. So pick any of their 4 games that are left to be played, 2 each in ACC play, and pick, have them lose one of those games, conference games. Doesn't matter about the non-conference games because they each have one of those too. Or Virginia or SMU just has 2 games left. They have an off week in there. I think Virginia does as well. So all their games left are conference games. Pick them to lose one of them. That's what you need. Conversely, I think you want Miami and Georgia Tech to keep winning. You want those teams to keep winning so they stay ranked in the top 25, stay ranked in the top 20, potentially climb into the top 15. Miami's already there at 15. Georgia Tech's right outside at 16. You want them to climb so that when you face them, you've got an opportunity for good quality wins. Now, of course, it starts with beating Notre Dame this weekend, but if you can do that, you want Miami and Georgia Tech to be as ranked as high as possible so you can get as much mileage as possible out of those games. So go Hurricanes and go Georgia Tech. Is there a hand signal? Is there like a gang sign for Georgia Tech? The wreck? Do they have a W? Miami's the U, and whatever. Go Georgia Tech, go Miami, right? You're rooting for those teams this weekend. Of course, Pitt has to take care of business itself. And we're not going to get into the matter of what's more important to win, Notre Dame or the ACC games. It's the ACC games. Look, here's what's really funny about this whole kerfluffle from people who've decided to spend, their annual 30 seconds paying attention to Pitt and commenting on things. Like, I walked out of Panther-Lair.com's press conference on Monday, and I didn't even bat an eye at the comment that has gotten so much play. It just, he said a thing. And I think I've just gone to a point with Panther-Lair.com that I understand what he's saying, and I sometimes think less about the words that he says. So it's just something like that. It just doesn't, I don't catch it. So I didn't really, and so I got home after the press conference on Monday, and I'm working, and I'm transcribing the press conference and loading the video and recording the Morning Pitt, like cutting up clips from that press conference, including the one that we're talking about, and like recording the Morning Pitt, talking about all that stuff, and then I get online, like actually go on the message boards and Twitter and whatnot later in the afternoon or early evening, and I'm like, holy crap, everyone's losing their mind over this. But I guess, I think, like, if you know what he was trying to say, if you understand what he was trying to say, which I don't think anyone's obtuse enough to not know what he was trying to say. I think if you understand what he was trying to say, you get it, and you just sort of chalk it up to, well, he probably could have said that better, or made that point better, or expressed that sentiment better than he did. But I think I'm a little bit, like, immune to it because I feel like it, like, happens every week, where I say, well, I think I know what he was saying. He just probably could have said it a little bit better. Still, the fact remains that Pitt's best, most likely, and most manageable path to the college football playoff in any year is going to be through the ACC championship game. And so, yes, that is what the focus is on. That doesn't mean you don't want to win against Notre Dame. That doesn't mean you don't want to beat Notre Dame. That doesn't mean there's not a lot at stake for your team against Notre Dame. But that Notre Dame game is not going to define the season any more than the Florida State game did, or any more than the Georgia Tech game. And ultimately, you have your path to the playoffs is probably through the ACC championship game. And you say, well, you got to beat Notre Dame to get an at-large bid. And yeah, that's true. Like, if you want to have a chance to be an at-large team, you need to win all 3 of these, be 10-2. And then if you get left out of the ACC championship game due to tiebreakers, or you go and you don't win, maybe you've still got a chance to get in as an at-large team. But no coach is going to talk about that. No coach of a number 24 team that is 7-2 with 3 games left to play is going to talk about what do we need to do to preserve our chances at an at-large bid. Once the regular season ends, then they'll make their case and they'll campaign for themselves, but they're not going to sit there with 3 games left to play and say, we're thinking about an at-large bid. You keep your eyes on the tangible prize and say, we're playing for the ACC championship. And in the meantime, yeah, they want to kick the hell out of Notre Dame. Of course they want to beat Notre Dame. But again, the national media, or the national college sports media, the national college football media, which is somehow even weirder than the regular national media, usually takes 30 or 45 seconds and decides to opine on Pitt for a little while, and you get it with the local media, and whatever. It doesn't change anything about this game. It doesn't change anything about how big this game is. It doesn't change anything about what's at stake in this game. It doesn't change anything about how anybody is viewing Pitt in this game. If Pitt loses or gets blown out, will that quote get thrown back at Pitt? Yep. Will that be the worst thing that happens to Pitt that day? No. It'll matter very, very little. And if they win, will that quote get thrown back at Pitt? Probably. Will that be the worst thing or the best thing that happens that day? Or will that take anything away from the win? No. So anyway, whatever. I've wasted way more time on that than I ever intended to or wanted to. And, I want to talk about Pitt Notre Dame. I've got a sheet where I wrote wrong stats and had to scribble them out. This is an important paper here, folks. All right, a few things to watch. A few important things for Pitt Notre Dame on Saturday. Looking at a few numbers, I was going to make a case about how, Notre Dame's on a 7-game winning streak, but look at the teams they played. Purdue, Arkansas, BC, geez. But you can't really do that without also pointing out Pitt's opponent record, where they have BC, who's 1-9. Notre Dame played them too. They have NC State, who's 5-4. And then Pitt has, because Notre Dame played them as well. And then Pitt played Florida State, who's 4-5, Syracuse, who's 3-7, and Stanford, who's 3-7. So Pitt's 5-game winning streak has included one team that currently has a winning record, and that's NC State. Notre Dame beat them as well. Notre Dame also beat Boise State, who's 6-3, USC, who's 7-2, and Navy, who is 7-2. Notre Dame's 7-game winning streak, they've only includes 3 teams with losing records. Purdue, who's 2-8, Arkansas, who's 2-7, and BC, who's 1-9. So not going to really go down that road of, who did they play, because that kind of cuts against Pitt even more. One interesting thing is Notre Dame's pass protection. They're keeping CJ Carr very, very clean. He's been under pressure on fewer than 30% of his snaps in 8 out of Notre Dame's 9 games this season. Even in the games they lost, you're still looking at lower than a 30% pressure rate. The only game where a team got pressure on CJ Carr on 30% of his dropbacks, according to Pro Football Focus, was Boise State. And they pressured him on an exact 30% of his dropbacks. And they did it. They blitzed about 35% of the time. So not a lot of pressure getting to CJ Carr. That's concerning, because it's tough. It's tough if you don't get pressure. Turnovers. Always going to be a big deal. Always going to be a big, topic of conversation when you get into discussing football. And usually coaches are right when they say that the team that wins the turnover battle probably wins. Notre Dame is more or less in that mold. They have won the turnover battle 6 times this season. They've been tied in the turnover battle twice, and they've lost the turnover battle once. When they've won the turnover battle 6 times this year, they are 6-0. When they've tied in the turnover battle, they beat Navy. Neither team had a turnover, and they lost to Texas A&M. Both teams had 1 each. The one time they lost the turnover battle was the Miami game in the season opener. Notre Dame committed 2 turnovers. Miami had 0, and obviously Notre Dame lost that game. So when they lose the turnover battle, the Irish are 0-1. When they win the turnover battle, they're 6-0, and when they're tied on the turnovers, they are 1-1. Pitt, the numbers don't line up quite as comfortably. One problem is, out of their 9 games this season, they've won the turnover battle just 3 times. That's not good. And they're 2-1 in those 3 games. So even when they've won the turnover battle, a win hasn't been guaranteed. The one loss coming in the West Virginia game, they turned it over once. West Virginia turned it over twice. Pitt also won the turnover battle against Boston College and Syracuse. Now, they've also won games when they've lost the turnover battle. They've lost the turnover battle 4 times this season, and their record is 3-1. They lost the turnover battle to Duquesne. They lost the turnover battle to Florida State. They lost the turnover battle to Stanford, and they lost the turnover battle to Louisville. But they only lost one of those games, the Louisville game. When they've been tied in the turnovers, which was Central Michigan and NC State, they've won both of those games. So you look at 9 games played, they've only won the turnover battle 3 times. And they've won games while losing the turnover battle 3 times. All that being said, even though there's not like a direct correlation between losing the turnover battle and losing games or winning and winning, you still want to win the turnover battle. I think this game, as much as any, will be one where the turnover battle the winner of the turnovers will be the winner of the game. I think for Pitt, you could screw around and turn it over 4 times against Stanford. You could turn it over, twice against Florida State and get away with it. You could turn it over at Syracuse. You could turn it over against NC State, and you could get away with it in these games. You're not going to be able to get away with it in this game. You're not going to be able to waste possessions in this game. And if they do what they've done way too much, what Eli Holstein did against Louisville and West Virginia, and what Mason Heinchel has developed a nasty habit of doing in the last few games, is turning it over in the red zone, turning it over at the goal line. You just are not going to be able to afford to waste possessions like that, particularly potentially productive possessions. Potentially productive possessions. That's a combination of words. You can't drive down and get inside the 20 and get inside the 15 and the 10 and throw an interception. You could get away with it against Stanford because Stanford stinks. Stanford's 3-7. You can get away with it against Syracuse because they're 3-7. You can get away with it against NC State. They're barely over 500. You can't get away with it against Notre Dame. They're too good. And I don't think you're going to get that many kicks at the can, as the man might say. I don't think you're going to get that many opportunities to get into the red zone, to get down near the goal line and potentially score. So when you get those opportunities, you have to protect the football. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be aggressive, because I think settling for field goals might hurt you almost as much as turning it over in the red zone. But you need to go for the end zone, but you've got to protect the ball. And I think there's a lot of things that of what that means for Mason Heinchel. Mostly it means that cliche, taking what the defense gives him, of not trying to be too aggressive, not trying to force the ball downfield, taking the short passes when they're there. If he drops back on first down and he's got an opportunity for a 4-yard pass, brother, take that thing all day long. And I don't care if it's a 4-yard pass to Justin Holmes, it's a 4-yard pass to Blue Hicks, it's a 4-yard pass to the running back, whoever it might be. Take it all day long. And if you only get 4, great. If that 4 turns into 7, better. If that 4 turns into 12, amazing. And all those things are real possibilities. And that kind of brings me back to one other thing that I think will be interesting to watch in this game is yards after the catch. I've been looking at some numbers for Notre Dame opponents, yards after the catch. Like Texas A&M had averaged 10.2 yards after the catch per reception. Let's say yak per reception. Purdue averaged more than 5 yak per reception. Boise State averaged more than 5. USC averaged more than 6. Miami averaged about 4.5 yak per reception. I think that's going to be really important in this game. I think it's going to be really important to make those short passes and let your playmakers make plays, whether it's Desmond Reed, it's Raphael Williams, whether it's Blue Hicks, whoever it might be. You need those guys to make plays, and you need to make those short passes so that those guys have a chance to make plays. Like the short passes, the short, quick passes, man, I mean, they do so much for you, right? They will get rid of the ball quickly, so you are under less pressure. They will, pick up small chunks of yards that can help you get first downs and move the ball downfield, and they'll give you those opportunities for yak. And probably the short, quick passes, ideally, are high percentage throws. And so, best case scenario, if everything goes the way it's supposed to, less likely to get picked off, less likely to result in turnovers. Play the yak game. Play the short, quick completion game. Play the high percentage game. All right, your running game may or may not be all that effective against this Notre Dame defensive front. But there are other ways. There's more than one way to skin a 4-yard gain, right? And those short, quick passes can do it. Now, maybe a guy who could have a big game here, Raphael Williams, okay? Because I was looking on my paper, and yes, this is the on this side, it's the final box score from the Pitt Eastern Michigan game. On this side, it's yak, pressure numbers, and one other thing I'm going to talk about. Because, we recycle here at Panther-Lair.com. Texas A&M, 174 yards after the catch in their Week 2 win over Notre Dame, or second game win over Notre Dame. Averaged 10.2 yak per reception. The main guy was Mario Craver, who had 11 targets, caught 7 passes for 207 yards and a touchdown. He had 137 yards after the catch. 137 yards after the catch. Huge numbers there. And I said, well, what did Craver do? How did he make all those plays? He was running prominently out of the slot. 82% of his pass snaps he ran out of the slot. Well, who runs out of the slot for Pitt? Raphael Williams. 86.1% of his snaps have come in the slot. I think he could be a guy, if he's deployed maybe in a similar way to the Texas A&M receiver. And I'm mostly just going off where he lines up, so I'm not going to pretend that I know if he runs the same kind of routes or things like that. But I think you're looking for guys who can make the catch, quick catch, get open, make the easy catch, and potentially get extra yards after it. Raphael Williams could have a big game in this. And I'm throwing this out there. I should throw out like one player each week that if he doesn't really do anything exceptional in the game, I just kind of forget that I even mentioned it. But if he goes off, I just like shout it from the rooftop. So Raphael Williams is my guy to watch this week. I think he has a chance working out of the slot to make some plays. But then maybe they'll like line up Desmond Reed in the slot or something like that, and he'll make all those plays. But I think they're going to have to get those yards after the catch. I think those short, quick, high percentage passes, that's the way to go here. That's going to, I think it alleviates a lot of the concerns, namely with how you deal with the pressure and avoiding turnovers, and then potentially, how you're going to move the ball down the field against a good Notre Dame defense. The one other thing I want to bring up, and I'm already gone longer than I wanted, probably because I got sidetracked talking about that Narduzzi thing. I asked a question on the message board yesterday. Who are the 5 best players on the team? In anyone's opinion, who are the 5 best players on the team? A lot of different answers. Almost all of them included Kyle Lewis. Most of them included Desmond Reed. Most of them included Mason Heinchel. Quite a few included Rasheem Biles. Quite a few included Cruz Brookins. And I'm going to stop there because that's the list to me. I think those are the 5 best players on the team. Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Cruz Brookins, Desmond Reed, and Mason Heinchel. And I mentioned those 5 guys because in 9 games, all right, the only time all 5 of them played was the Central Michigan game, and that's when Mason Heinchel came in for the mop-up duty at the end of the game. This is the only one of Pitt's 9 games this season that all 5 of those guys have played. Just double-checking something. Yep, I'm right about that. If you look at Mason Heinchel's 5 starts, they have had 4 of those 5 guys play in the Boston College game because Desmond Reed was out. 4 of those 5 guys played in the Florida State game because Cruz Brookins was out. 4 of those 5 played in the Syracuse game because Rasheem Biles was out. 3 of those 5 played in the NC State game. Biles and Lewis were both out. And only 2 of those 5 guys played in the Stanford game. Mason Heinchel and Kyle Lewis. Desmond Reed, Cruz Brookins, and Rasheem Biles were out. My point, dear friends, is that Pitt has not had these 5 players who I think, I don't think you get too much argument about being them being the 5 best or most impactful players on the team. Pitt has not had a game with all 5 of them on the field together. Because even if you look at the Central Michigan game, it was mop-up duty. I don't think Desmond Reed was playing. Talking about guys starting, guys playing prominent roles. They have not had a game all season with all 5 of those guys. And that's before you even get into some of the corners that have been hurt and the offensive linemen that have been hurt and, Jaden Moore and Blaine Spires and all this different stuff. Coming out of this off week, there's a chance I think you'll see all 5 of these guys and more on the field together for the first time all season. And brother, I'm real interested to see what that looks like. I think you probably are too. We're getting closer and closer, folks. It's already Wednesday. Just a few more days, and it'll be Pitt Notre Dame at noon, college game day, all the hoopla that you can possibly conjure up, and I'm sure plenty more kerfluffles between now and then. But make sure you stay tuned right here. Like this video, subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and stay tuned at Panther-Lair.com. We've got some good content coming for you. Something I'm really excited about. I don't like to talk about things before we do it, but I'm excited about it. I think you're going to dig it. So looking forward to that. Probably tomorrow is what I'm shooting for. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Little tease there at the end. Don't forget the live show tonight, Panther-Lair Show, 8:30 p.m. here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And we'll be back tomorrow with another Morning Pit. So enjoy your Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.